A lot of NBA to get into. Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM, NBA Radio, Forbes, the Sporting News, longtime NBA writer, talking a little NBA playoffs with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mitch, welcome back, pal. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing today, Mike? All right?
Always good, pal. NBA playoffs, really interesting stories. Let's start home here with the Sixers. They got into a fight the other night that they couldn't win. Any concern now going into Game 3, having to go to Miami? They haven't won in Miami since 2014. Not that that matters with this team, but they didn't win the 2 games down there this year.
Well, I think Joel Embiid, it's time to get him rolling back out on the court, and that way they can have more talent than Miami and win this thing in maybe 5 or 6 games and get on to the next round. I think Joel Embiid would provide that. And I don't know what his situation is, but obviously they need him at both ends of the court. We saw in Game 2 that they're not going to shoot like they did in Game 1. And, Miami's a tough, rugged team. They don't have a lot of great talent, and Dwayne Wade's not going to do the things he did in Game 2 every night. But they're in a fist fight, and I think Joel Embiid could help quite a bit. So what's the latest on him? Is he playing Game 3 or not?
He's flying down there with the team. It's 50-50, I guess, at this point. I mean, they're not going to commit, but, he sent out the Instagram the other night. That set up a stir.
Yes,
but,
did.
Yep, my gut feeling tells me he will probably be – I mean, right now I would say 50-50. They have not really played their hand at all in this one. But
I expect to see him.
Yeah?
I expect he'll be out there in a mask. And you know what? It's not Oklahoma City. It's not the old Sacramento crowd. You can go into Miami and win. I know, look, all of a sudden, after winning 17 straight games, there goes the home court advantage down the drain. But they can regain that because Miami's not a tough place to play. Not a raucous, venomous crowd at all. I've been there a million times, and that's out of all the home court advantages, that's one of the least effective that I've seen.
Now, if Embiid for some reason does not play, now he is making the trip, which would say that he probably, if anything, he plays in Game 4. He did fly down there today with the team. So, but if they don't have Embiid, the Heat basically got into a fight with them, and the Sixers had gotten to this point by shooting the 3. Are they able to kind of – this is a big game for Brett Brown to make the adjustment, right? Spoelstra made his adjustment. What does Brown need to do?
well, Eric's adjustment was he gave the ball to Dwayne Wade to let him shoot. They're still going to shoot threes. You'd like to see Philly get to the basket more, drive the ball more. They got to play with more force, and they got to take it to Miami. What you saw the other night was that Miami was all over Ben Simmons and all over them, and they somehow have to figure out a way to get Ben Simmons free and not make him, the scorer, make him the passer again, get those assists back up, and start making some shots again. Could Fultz play a bigger role? Fultz can get to the basket. A lot of their guys who are perimeter scorers don't put the ball on the ground.
Right.
And that was the thing that, I thought the one thing that Philly really lacked this year was they didn't have that guy. That's why I was a proponent for them to get Tyreek Evans. Of course, that's water under the bridge. They need guys who can get the ball and get it to the basket, go north-south, get Miami into some foul trouble, make plays for others if Ben Simmons can't do that. So maybe Fultz will have a bigger role. I don't know, but, you're limited by what kind of talent you have. But then again, they could step up and make some shots that they didn't make the other night, and that would help considerably. So we'll see what Brett Brown has in mind.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess the big thing, too, you mentioned it, they let Dwayne Wade play. The first game, he only played like 19 minutes. He scores 28. He's averaging over 20 points a game in 4 games against the Sixers this year. Can he dial back into Wade back machine again?
I don't.
Does he have another one of these names in him?
Well, he's 36 years old. The good thing for guys like that is that they're not playing back-to-back. You've seen what Rondo's done in the series against Portland. But what you also have to do is you got to take advantage of Dwayne Wade at the other end. You have to get him into situations where he's going to have to expend some energy, run him off some picks, make him expend energy at the defensive end if you can do that. But you know what? You can't count on guys of that age to give it to you every night. And Spolstra certainly can't. And that's why I still like Philly's chances, because if you look at Miami – they don't have, I've said this before. If you had a draft of all the players from the 16 playoff teams, where would the Miami guys be drafted? And who would be drafted first? And how far down the line? They'd be some of the last players taken in the draft overall, because they just don't have the star power. Whether it's Dragic, who might be their best player, or Dwayne Wade, you'd have to put up there for old time's sakes. But, they play a certain way. They play a certain style. You have to the one thing that I was surprised about from Philly was Philly had done a great job defensively the last, since January 1st or whatever, and that defense the other night was not up to snuff, so they have to really bring it at the defensive end too.
Yeah, but that's the one thing that does worry me about Miami, Mitch, is they know who they are. A lot of teams don't like to comply with what their identity is. Miami at least is willing to do it. They know who they are, and that's what a little bit would concern me if I'm a Sixer fan, is the Heat are willing to comply with who they are.
Well, that's where if Embiid comes back, you'll have you'll have the best player on the court in the series. You'll have the best two with he and Simmons. And then Miami will come in after that. So we'll see how it shakes out. It's going to be fascinating to see with plenty of days off between the 2 and 3. Everybody should have their legs, and I still like Philly in this series.
Mitch, looking at Game 2, there was a lot of not real criticism of Brett Brown, but just noticed that, Eric Spoelstra had the upper hand. Did you see the same thing?
Upper hand in terms of what? He had Dwayne Wade. That was his number one thing. And they couldn't, the thing what disappointed me was that Brett Brown needed to do, go get at Dwayne Wade, get the ball out of his hands. The thing is, they don't have, to me, they don't have a lot of great shot makers on that team. They have pedestrian talent. And, you can't let Dwayne Wade start going. And when he starts to get going, you have to double him, run extra people at him, and make other people beat you. That's what Brett Brown didn't do from what I saw.
When you look at his decision to go with T.J. McConnell, and he basically said that the game was getting too physical, he wanted to go with a player that's played the whole year with McConnell over Fultz. I said it earlier in the show when we were talking, and you kind of alluded to it when you were talking earlier, that Fultz is a guard that can get to the basket and help get these shooters open. And I thought that's what, he could have went to that and tried to get.
Yeah, he could have. He could have used, I don't know, what was Fultz's final minutes tally?
5.
I didn't even, 5. That's not enough. Right. He needs guys who can get to the basket. I mean, look, Bellinelli, Ilyasova, J.J. Redick, they're long-distance shooters. They're guys who need to be open. You can run them around picks, but nobody's going to the basket, none of those guys. And the way they played Ben Simmons, they were basically going to say, you'll score, but we're not going to, get beat off the assist. So, yeah, I think he could have done a better job with Markelle Fultz. Whether Fultz was, I don't know. He'll tell you why. I have no idea why he didn't go to Fultz. Was that an oversight? Yeah, it didn't. It's not going to cost him the series.
Or Mitch, is that an indication he doesn't quite trust Fultz yet?
Could be a lot of things. Fultz, conditioning-wise, might not be ready for playoff action like we want him to be with, extended minutes. There might be that. So who knows? But at this time, to me, you got to be able to score. And when your guys aren't making threes like they did in Game 1, and we all knew they were going to shoot again like that, then you have to come up with other people. And Fultz, to me, when he wasn't out there, they definitely could have used him.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio, Forbes, The Sporting News. Last night, every game, the result ended up in a 2-0 series. Are all 3 of the teams down 0-2 done?
I'd say, because Portland lost both games at home, they're looking pretty cooked. I did a Sirius post-game show, watched that game, and, what you saw was that their backcourt of Lillard and McCollum is getting outplayed by Rondo and Drew Holiday. Rondo, they're now 17-1 when he plays at least 6 minutes of fourth quarters. They couldn't get him off the floor. There were plays down the stretch of that game where Portland was outfought for loose balls, out-hustled. New Orleans made all the winning plays. They had a stretch where they made, after Portland took a 1-point lead with about 3 minutes to go, here comes New Orleans, and they make 3 huge threes. Anthony Davis isn't even the focal point. They got him from Mirotic and Holiday, and then Rondo off of an unbelievable play where Etuan Moore missed a free throw, got his own rebound, and missed a layup, and they still came up with the loose ball, Rondo and Moore, and then Rondo hit a dagger 3. So I'd say, look, I still think Milwaukee can beat Boston. I know it looks impossible at times, but I think between Antetokounmpo and Middleton, they gotta, they can ring the bell for a lot more. Their problem is they haven't been able to hold down Rozier, which sounds weird because this is his first start. He hasn't made a turnover yet in over 70 minutes. I still think Milwaukee has a shot there. Washington has internal issues. You can see that. Toronto's a superior team. The key for me was, we were all talking about how they couldn't win a Game 1, but then, they had to win Game 2 because it's a weird experience for them. They win the opener, but you felt like, can they deal with prosperity? And they certainly did a great job. I mean, they're ringing up all kinds of points with their bench. DeRozan came to play last night. That could easily be a sweep, depending on Washington's psyche, because Washington's got, like I said, you worry about their chemistry. So I'd say, Portland definitely is up, they're against the ropes. And I still give Milwaukee a shot, but Washington is a flighty team, and they could be swept out too.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, watching Toronto, if I don't know what you felt about them entering, but do you feel better about them and take them more serious after seeing the way that they mean business?
Well, they do. I like their bench. They've gotten great contributions from DeLon Wright and C.J. Miles. Game one, if you looked at the shots for DeRozan and Lowry, their shooting statistics, and you just didn't know the result, you figured they would have lost another game one. That would have been their fifth straight with those two guys opening up first round. But, yeah, I'm taking them more seriously. I mean, they're veterans. They've been there. They've, had a lot of playoff scars here, especially against Cleveland. But they look pretty good. They're not they're not, to me, an elite team by any stretch. That's still the Warriors. That's still the Rockets. Those, to me, are the only two elite teams. But that doesn't mean they can't come out of the East, because you got some wounded teams, whether it's Boston, whether it's Cleveland. Philadelphia has shown some warts here. Toronto, this could be their year.
Mitch, talking about Cleveland, you look at the game the other day at home against Indiana, and in previewing tonight, listen, I said it, I think LeBron James needs to go more into a scoring mode. Because the teammates that he has, they really just aren't up to par to compete at this level of competition.
Well, that's off of one game, but I'll say this. I think LeBron came out with, I'm going to be the facilitator, and he didn't shoot the ball for the first 10 minutes. That obviously didn't work out because Jeff Green and Kevin Love were no factors. That'll change tonight. I expect LeBron to come out, but I expect they're going to have a different mindset. The word was, and I wasn't there, but the word was when you walked into the locker room before the game, they were sitting there watching the Boston-Milwaukee game. They weren't even watching tapes of the Pacers, which is very unusual and speaks to they didn't have the correct focus, And you saw when they came out, I mean, Indiana came out and took it to them right away, punched them in the nose, and Cleveland guys backed off. They weren't aggressive. They weren't assertive. Very, very disappointing from that standpoint. And LeBron basically didn't take his first shot till 10 minutes into the game. We'll see how he changes tonight. I think he's going to impose his will from the start, then get other people involved, put Indiana on their heels, and on the other end of the court, get the ball out of Victor Oladipo's hands and make Reggie Miller beat you. Except they don't have a Reggie Miller. So that's what you got to do. They don't have guys like that. They've got, Bogdanovich, and they've got Collison. Okay, force them to beat you, because Victor Oladipo's got a chip on his shoulder. Remember, when, the Cavaliers were trying to get Paul George in the trade and that fell through and they ended up with Victor Oladipo, Dan Gilbert, the owner, came out and said, Indiana could have done better than what they got. And Victor Oladipo's used that to fuel his fire here. So what they got to do after that 32-point performance in Game 1 was get the ball out of his hands, make other Pacers beat you, and tie the series up at 1-1.
Mitch, bigger picture, I mean, obviously LeBron James isn't losing in the first round of the NBA playoffs in the Eastern Conference. I mean, but does this say more about, listen, it's going to be one of the all-time greats if he's going to get this Cleveland team to the finals or even beyond, because he just doesn't have the dogs that he's had the last couple of years for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Well, he doesn't have Kyrie Irving, and I've been screaming about that since they made the trade, is that would be the biggest problem. They had, in the Eastern Conference, the way it played out the last 3 years when he was 36-5 against Eastern competition was the end of a shot clock, at the end of a game, it was he and Kyrie going up against, whoever they were playing, and they held the upper hand because they had the two guys who could make something out of nothing. Now you wonder who that second option is. I mean, the other night, they had no it was a pathetic thing. They scored 80 points. The Cavaliers are a bad defensive team. They may not stop Victor Oladipo this whole series because they can't stop guards like that who can penetrate. But what you figure they can do against Indiana is still get you 110, 112 points. And, 80 points with a 15-point fourth quarter ain't getting it done. So we'll see how they rebound off of that. We'll see if their offense is any better, if they got more shot makers out there, if Kevin Love and Jeff Green can deliver guys like that. We'll see if George Hill can make some shots. LeBron going into, everybody thinks this is worse than his 2007 team. He didn't have a Kevin Love in 2007, so it's not that bad. But obviously, I still look at it this way. As bad as they are, they still have LeBron James who's playing at a high level. They can't get to the Eastern. They can't get to the finals again.
No.
I mean, Somebody still has to play and beat him 4 times in a series. Now, maybe it's Indiana. I kind of doubt that still. I still think they're in good shape for the series, but obviously they have to win tonight.
Now, hypothetically, if Indiana won tonight, are you burying Cleveland, or do you still give them the check mark in this series?
Depends how the games are played. Depends what the Cavs look like. Depends if, what we're seeing in some of these series, like I've watched a lot of the New Orleans-Portland series, and to me, the way they're dealing with Lillard and the way Rondo is playing and Drew Holiday's playing and Anthony Davis, those type of things don't go away, those advantages that they have. Well, now watch. They'll go down to the Big Easy. They'll go down to Bourbon Street, and it'll be 2-2 after a couple of days. But I'm still a big guy when it comes to LeBron James. I still think that in a lot of ways, I know they have deficiencies defensively. I know they don't have Kyrie Irving. I know they don't have that great number 2 option anymore. But they still have LeBron playing at a tremendous level. So even if they're down 0-2, I'm going to say, you know what, I can still see him winning. I can still, this might be the playoff year, guys, where LeBron plays a 7-game series in the first round. He plays a 7-game series in the second round. I'm not going to put anything past him, but he definitely has a limited team. He has a team that's definitely more vulnerable, and it's going to really reflect badly on the Raptors or the Sixers or the Celtics or whoever if they can't get by LeBron James this year, because it definitely looks like he could lose in the Eastern Conference, which we haven't been able to talk about in a long time.
No, we haven't. Mitch Lawrence is with us. You got a couple of interesting ones in the West tonight. Utah, Oklahoma City. Minnesota gave Houston a game. Houston kind of falls into a situation where Minnesota would have been a higher seed had Butler not got hurt. So this one could be a more interesting series. But both these West games tonight are pretty compelling.
Well, Houston killed Minnesota in the regular season. It wasn't even close. Here's a team that makes a ton of threes, number 1 in the league, all-time records, versus the Tom Thibodeau team. They don't believe in shooting threes, so do the math. They had a great chance to steal a game. Jimmy Butler couldn't get the job done late. Karl Anthony Towns was no factor. He's got to be a lot more assertive. Sometimes you'll see a series. Detroit played Cleveland a couple of years ago. Remember that first-round series where they gave them 4 great games, but it just wasn't enough? We might be headed for that, or we might be headed for, now Houston all of a sudden starts making their threes, and once again, it's a blowout situation. I don't know. I mean, the one thing that Thibodeau has no answer for is James Harden. James Harden's going to be able to put up all kinds of Gordian numbers in this series. If he gets any kind of help from Chris Paul, who was bad the other night, and the other supporting guys, this is still going to be a rout. To me, I don't think Minnesota can win it. The great thing for them, though, is that Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins are finally getting a taste of the playoffs and what it's all about, and so they're going to learn some great lessons. In the other series, if Donovan Mitchell is slowed by this foot injury, Oklahoma City's going to have an easier time than you'd expect with Utah, because Donovan Mitchell means so much. We got to look at Paul George, how he moves tonight. He's got a bad hip. That kind of limited the last couple of days, but he had a great opener for them. He had 8 threes, which is a franchise record, which when you think about it is a remarkable record because Kevin Durant played there and James Harden played there and obviously Westbrook. So a good start for Oklahoma City. The big thing for them, that last night of the season, guys, where the home courts were determined, you had a situation where if Utah had beaten Portland, they would have had home court advantage. You had the Spurs losing. If they would have won, they would have had a home court advantage. Oklahoma City, by virtue of beating Memphis and the other things that fell into place for them, they get the home court advantage. So that's a arena. I've been there a few times in playoffs and regular season. It's about the loudest, most craziest arena, real home court advantage there. But for Utah, if they don't have, like I said, Donovan Mitchell, tremendous rookie year, but if he's not playing or if he's off his game or not playing with that foot, not giving him what he can, that could be a quicker series than we think.
Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA Radio. A couple quickies. By the way, you've covered the NBA for a long time, Mitch. You've seen essentially the entire Spurs Popovich era. Are we seeing the end of it? Is it crumbling before our eyes?
Well, I think first of all, this is the worst draw they could possibly have because they can't deal with Durant, they can't deal with Klay Thompson, and they just don't have enough firepower to beat Golden State. And you saw Pop, and I'm sure some of it was hyperbole, but he said it was the best defense that they went up against in Game 1, where they got absolutely manhandled. Especially if they are going to move Kawhi Leonard. I think all signs point to a divorce. I can't see them after everything that's happened all of a sudden turning around saying, oh, yeah, by the way, here's a $200 million extension. I think what you're going to see is a trade. I think the Clippers could have a couple of lottery picks this year. You might see them go to the Clippers. I don't know about the talk about Philadelphia, how serious that is, but Kawhi Leonard could be on the move. And, yeah, if Kawhi Leonard is moved, then, their best player is going to be LaMarcus Aldridge, and certainly that drops them down considerably in the West. If you have a Kawhi Leonard, you can compete. You can, like last year they got to the conference finals. But without him, back to the drawing board for Pop, you're going to have to find the next Kawhi Leonard, and that ain't easy.
Mitch, your article at Sporting News is about the coaching carousel. I love watching it. So give us a couple quick hits on what you think the coaching carousel could look like this offseason. We've already seen a couple guys fired. We've seen some guys interviewing who have jobs I find to be interesting.
Yeah, Mike Budenholzer's one of them, the guy from Atlanta. They want to get rid of him, so they've given him permission to leave. Phoenix obviously has interest in him. Dave Fizdale, the old Memphis coach, has a big connection in Phoenix with James Jones, the former Heat player who was there with LeBron, and when Dave Fizdale was an assistant there. So he might have the inside track because James Jones right now, VP of basketball operations. We'll see how that shakes out. Fizdale's also mentioned for the Knicks job. They're interviewing everybody you can imagine, a cast of thousands, including Jerry Stackhouse, Mark Jackson. No interest in Jeff Van Gundy. I think Jeff is actually too good for the Knicks right now. Steve Mills and Scott Perry are conducting, they're going about it the way they want, which is fine, but I don't know if they're going to hire the right guy. And I think Orlando likes Jerry Stackhouse. He's got connections there with the new people in charge. Jeff Weltman was big with the Toronto organization, and Jerry's been there. And Charlotte is looking at guys like Artur Messina. When Mitch Kupchak ran the Lakers, Artur Messina was part of Mike Brown's staff. We'll see if he makes the big leap and hires a guy who basically everybody knows from having a great career as a European coach. He's been an assistant with Greg Popovich. I expect Milwaukee's going to open. We'll see. It looks like it's going to be what's his name? Monty Williams used to be, right? He coached the Pelicans last time they were in the playoffs.
Yep.
Joe Prunty's been an interim, but it looks like he's on his way out. And Atlanta, if Mike Budenholzer gets another job, the word is they want to get maybe a Golden State assistant, whether it's Jaron Collins or a young college coach type. I don't know who that would be, but, yeah, there are going to be some other openings, so we'll see what happens.
Mitch, we'll close out with this. We endured a considerable amount of time tanking here in Philadelphia, an owner berating the coach for winning. The NBA is going down a slippery, dirty slope here, pal.
I had no idea that when were the Sixers involved in tanking?
Well,
yeah. Well, you know what? I was, that's not unusual. The thing is, when you're tanking, the coach has to be in on it,
on board.
He has to know, on board. And I was in a situation when I covered the Mavericks in Dallas years ago where the coach ended the season winning some meaningless games, and the front office wasn't happy. But that's something you have to coordinate. You basically have to tell the coach he's got to play the end of the bench in fourth quarters and lose with a purpose. That's a nice way of saying tanking.
All right. Of course, this story gaining a lot of steam all over the NBA, and Mitch Lawrence, SiriusXM NBA radio, covering the actual games on the court, the NBA playoffs. They continue tonight. The Sixers tomorrow. We'll have plenty more and be talking to Mitch throughout the NBA playoffs here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks, pal.
Thanks. Enjoyed it. Talk to you.